Hello and welcome to the first session of Karen's Colours for 2026. This is going to be one of those monthly colour forecasts, but before embarking on a reading for January 2026, I'd like to remind us all that this is a traditional time to review the past year before setting out our goals and resolutions for the upcoming year. If you've already done those resolutions, then maybe you might like to consider them in the light of what I present today. We're going to be examining the progress made, the setbacks encountered, the challenges that we've overcome, and the work that has been left undone. But before we begin, thank you once again for attending this session. I know that there are not many of you that do so, but I'm certainly hoping that those of you who do will get something positive out of these readings. The reading itself is going to be rather truncated because I'll spend most of the time looking at 2025 in review. We're going to be examining the colours of the main skills and experiences that you've had, the colours of the primary blockages or deficits that have afflicted you throughout the year. And the review will encourage you to think where you're going to go next. There'll be creation of New Year's resolutions that are involved, but those, of course, are very personal to you. And of course, because we make New Year's resolutions, there are lots of goals to be set, lots of ideas about where we want to go next. There is an importance in reviewing past experience so that we can create a future path. And that future path will be denoted by one colour card for January 26. And I'm going to also give you an oracle card to help guide the way. But otherwise, the reading will be extremely truncated. Certainly, enjoy. And finally, we come to people with birthdays in December, to examine just what happened during 2025 so that we have some sort of guidance for 2026. In February 2025, when I began these colour readings, the first colours that dominated in your reading were purple and red. Now, purple and red tend, when they are together, to offer some sort of optimism, some sort of hope for the future. Purple is all about imagination, and red is all about energy, about passion. And so here we have disruption of what was and hyperactivity, that is the ability to move rapidly in any direction that your imagination takes you. In March, that passion was still there, but now it became rather undifferentiated. You were hyper aware of all of the possibilities that were available out there in the real world, and you were confronted by some of them too. White, as a major colour, always has to do with the clash with reality. By April, that had settled down. You had the opportunity to make some choices, to re-examine your values, and also, because of the cyan, you were able to simply calm down, allow whatever was going on in your life to take its course, and to settle back, to relax, and to enjoy that. But by May, that had become overwhelming. Black was the dominant colour here, and that basically meant you needed to rest and recuperate. Now, you may have found yourself having caught some sort of illness at the time. I don't know, because I wasn't there. But the time out to rest was important, whether it was because of a physical condition or whether it was because of a psycho-emotional condition. When black appears as a dominant colour, it always says, pay attention to your inner life, pay attention to your psychic self. By June, that need to withdraw and to consider what's going on inside rather than be controlled by what's going on outside continued. But now it was accompanied by blue, which meant that there were things that still needed to be done. You had duties and responsibilities to follow through. And orange, which of course meant that there was a need for the confidence, the courage, the wherewithal to stand up and do what had to be done. This often means confrontation of some sort. And that may have been successful for you because by July, there were opportunities that were arising for you. You had choices that you had to make. And by August, those choices remain as a dominant part of your reading. So you had freedom. You had freedom to choose what you wanted to do, where you wanted to go, and how you wanted to do things. Your values were being recreated. But by September, once again, you were back out to needing that time out to rest. Now, it could be that you hadn't really properly recovered from whatever it was that had afflicted you back in May. On the other hand, it could be a new issue that arose. But certainly, there was a feeling of having been let down. And that continued through into October, where you started to make plans, you started to set goals, to develop ambitions, to start to examine what practical skills you needed to learn in order to move forward. But you were keeping this fairly secret, fairly under wraps. You didn't want people to be aware of what it is that you were going to do or where you were headed. In November, that same ability to create goals and to follow through on the various different practical skills that you needed was still there, but now there was no energy left to do anymore. So this is why I think that perhaps you may have had a fairly rough year of physical health, because when there is a lack of energy that follows a black phase, so a pink energy that follows a black energy, that generally suggests that there was something that was physically wrong with you at the time, and that you needed time to recuperate, but you didn't actually give yourself sufficient time. Nevertheless, by your birthday month, you had managed to set yourself on the path towards healing. You were starting to feel good again. Things had been disrupted, now were being made better. And they were being made better so that you were recreating whatever it was in your life that was heading you towards an imaginative future that was going to be wonderful for you. So what colors were the ones that were dominant throughout the year? Well, here we have two, black and white. Black slightly more common than the white. But the interesting thing here is that they are opposites. They are extremes. They don't appear on the color wheel. So we can't even put them down as being part of that color wheel as we know it. Instead, these are the extremes of what is and what can be imagined. What you are dealing with in reality is the white energy, and what you can imagine or what you would like, what you are dreaming about is the black energy. But being torn between the two is not a comfortable place to be. And having these as your dominant colors throughout the year means that you were finding yourself constantly in a state of clashing with reality and having to withdraw to recuperate from whatever it is that reality had been throwing at you. The black was all about withdrawal, repression, and recovery, whereas the white is all about curiosity, experience, and shock. So the two of them are not compatible with one another, and you would have felt that incompatibility throughout the year, being pushed and pulled in various different directions and not really being in control of any of them. So what then were the issues that were facing you, or the things that you were trying to avoid throughout the year? Well, in February, there were 7 different colors that were missing, and these set down the baseline for what follows. By March, black, blue, and orange had become the dominant colors for the issues in your life. There was a need for withdrawal, there was a need for organizing yourself, there was a need for being confident and courageous in the face of some sort of crisis, and you were trying to avoid all of those. That exact same pattern continued through to April, but by May, the withdrawal and the crisis had disappeared, and instead you were simply stuck with having to do your duty. There were responsibilities that had to be undertaken, and you were the only one available to do so. By June, those responsibilities continued, but now they were added to by brown. Now, brown is all about those practical skills and the goals and ambitions that you really needed to set in motion. But of course, remember, these are the issues, the things you were avoiding. So you weren't actually doing this. And that continued all the way through July. By August, the nurturing, the control of all of your resources, the getting things done, your responsibilities, they had all faded into the background, and brown was the dominant color. That continued through September and October, and it put in an appearance again in November, but this time accompanied by yellow. The blue came back again, so your responsibilities reared themselves, but you also had gray. Now, yellow is all about fears and having to learn something new, digesting information, and you were trying very hard to avoid those. At the same time, you were also trying hard to avoid any issues that enabled any sort of imbalance to happen, because grey is all about imbalance and uncertainty and confusion, and you didn't want to deal with those. Yet that was the very colour that has been dominant throughout your birthday month of December. So what do we have here? All in all, across the year, the one issue that kept coming up for you as a colour that you needed to deal with but weren't was grey. Grey, that uncertainty, that confusion, that imbalance, that insecurity, that procrastination that stopped you from doing what you needed to do, and the inability to be objective about the issues that were at hand. Those were the things that you were most avoiding. And as a result of those, your entire year comes down to swinging between safety seeking, that is avoidance, it's the black side of things, and risk-taking approach, which is the white side of things. And both black and white, when we put them together, form grey, which was your dominant issue, your dominant problem. So you've got an interesting combination here of approach avoidance to try and keep an even keel when confusion is likely to reign. All of this was exacerbated by your inability to find any form of middle ground. And that leaves you with a rather uncomfortable way of standing. There are no actual colours as such, no hues within your colour readings throughout the year that are any consequence when we look at it from an entire year's perspective. So let's now have a look at what will be expected in the new year. Well, while I shuffle to obtain a colour card to lead you off in 2026, I also have chosen from the various different oracle decks I have, The Soul's Journey by James Van Praagh, because this particular deck has a series of affirmations or little meditations that you can use to help guide you towards a more comfortable 2026 than you seem to have experienced during 2025. So let's now look for that color card. And what we have here is purple on black. Black is, when it's internally, when it's in the bottom of the combination, has to do with depression. It has to do with a need for time out, a need for recovery, a need for getting over whatever the problem was that's in the real world. And the problem that was in the real world was an ability to heal. Have you actually been ill? If that's the case, whether it's a physical illness or a mental illness, or there's been some major disruption in your life that has destroyed your equanimity, certainly the purple and black together is asking you to make one last adjustment to create whatever it is that needs to be created out of your imagination, from your link to your own inner worth, your own inner self, to your psychic self if necessary, in order to create a life that is going to be fun, There is certainly not much fun in the year that you've just experienced. But maybe fun is something that is possible for you. But first, you need to be honest about facing your own inner demons. Now, in terms of an affirmation card, what we have here is service. I feel good when I can help others. It's an interesting combination because both purple and black are the colors of psychic energy. The black is the deep intuitive knowing, the actual linking through meditation with either your spirit guides, your past life, your own inner knowledge, whatever it happens to be. And the purple in the real world is the knowing how to fix things, how to heal. So offering service is one of the readings that you can make for this purple and black combination. It requires a great deal of effort, though, from your part, because you're the one that needs to allow yourself to understand internally, to get in touch with whatever information is inside that enables you to find the proper words, the proper actions that will give service to others to enable their healing. And in turn, that will heal you. So, are you prepared to take that on? It's a big challenge. Well, I hope you received something positive out of that annual review and have taken on board the small color reading and affirmation as a guide towards 2026. Certainly, looking at these readings from an annual perspective, a retrospective, I've come across a number of insights, both for myself, but also on behalf of those people that I know that have birthdays in the various months that I have been reading for. And one of the things that's come up here is whether or not I would even bother to continue with these. I feel hopeful that I should. I also feel as though I need to make some alterations. If you can think of suggestions that might make these more user-friendly, if you've been following the readings at all, you might even find that there's something in them that you might like to comment about. And I'd really appreciate those comments, because right now I'm in a dilemma, which is why I haven't actually done a full reading for every month, for every birthday month for January. It all depends on the results of this reading as to whether or not I continue. I have a lot to contemplate. My black is quite prominent too. Anyway, if you're new here and you haven't actually seen these before, you might think they're a bit confusing. That's part and parcel of a colour reading. It's something that most people will never have experienced. So I wish you all the best for 2026, and hopefully we'll meet again for more colour readings. If not, plenty of other things I can talk about that have to do with colour. Until next time, bye.